But especially after that, when you arrive to the Marquesas Islands, and it's like after 40 days of not seeing land, like, wow, the sunrises and the sunsets on the boat and the stars at night, you can almost not imagine how beautiful they are. Because around the cities and on land, there's lights, there's pollution, there's buildings. But on the ocean, you don't have that. So you can really see every type of color of sunrise and sunset, pink, purple, golden. It's like every morning and every evening was a treat. It was so beautiful. And the stars at night, when I had to do a night shift, I was just sitting, monitoring and listening to music, and the stars were so bright and so many. Like I'd never ever seen that before.
Welcome back to the show. I'm Paul Schmid, the host of The Pursuit Zone, a podcast that interviews explorers from around the globe to bring you their exciting stories. These are people that dream big, break out of their comfort zones, and take on ambitious pursuits. This is episode 189 with Huub Vlogs. Let's get into the show, and let me introduce my guest. While in Kyrgyzstan in 2018, he bought a Russian-made 1987 UAZ 452 van. After converting it into a campervan, he drove off to explore Central Asia, Iran, and Pakistan. After Pakistan, he shipped the van to Argentina, where he has begun a multi-year road trip to Alaska. But before all of this, he lived on sailboats, cycled the length of New Zealand, and rode a motorcycle through Vietnam. You can learn more about these adventures at his YouTube channel, Huub Vlogs. Huub Vlogs, welcome to the Pursuit Zone.
Thank you. And it's an amazing description. It feels so much more exciting than it often is in reality.
Huub, where did you grow up?
I grew up in the Netherlands, in a small city, a small town actually. Like basically Amsterdam is like middle west, and then Utrecht is in the middle, and I'm like on the east side, close to the German border.
And I read that you studied economics at university. Why did you choose economics?
Well, it was the most logical choice. In my family, most of the people were businessmen. So I grew up with the idea that I was supposed to be a businessman too. And yeah, my father studied business economics and my uncle commercial economics. And I liked commercial economics a little bit more. So yeah, I just followed the normal path that I thought I was supposed to do.
My understanding is that after university, you ended up moving to South Africa and then eventually New York City to study acting. I mean, what was that time and that experience like for you?
Well, after I graduated economics, I worked at a bank for a year, and I don't know, I just didn't really enjoy it. And at the same time, I was competing professionally in horses. And if you're competing professionally, it's 7 days a week, like every day. Like during the week, it's training. So I would go to work, and after that, or before and after that, I would train. In the weekends, it was competitions. So basically, this means it's never vacation or party. It's always work, work, work. I didn't really like working at the bank. I quit it, and then I started my own company, and that didn't work out. And at that same time, my relationship ended, and also a little bit earlier, my sponsor quit. So I always wanted to live abroad for a year or in a student house, but I never did that because I was always busy with the horses. And I thought, this is my moment. If I don't do it now, and maybe in a while I'm settled and I have children and I maybe cannot do it anymore, or at least it's more difficult to do. And in the time I was also talking to my family members and friends, like, what should I do? The economy was not good. And at that moment when my uncle said to me, you should go work in a foreign country, because if you do that, you do something different than what other people do. And then when you come back, every company wants to have you. And then I thought, okay, I already thought about doing something like this. I just have to do it. I mean, the thought process was obviously a little bit longer. So then I literally just gave up everything and moved to South Africa, where I worked for 6 months at Dutch South African Chamber of Commerce. And in that time, I really enjoyed wine and how the process was of how they make wine. So I started studying that in the evening. And after that 6 months ended, I moved to Stellenbosch. The 6 months were in Johannesburg. And then I moved to Stellenbosch, which is closer to Cape Town, which is on the south of South Africa. And there I actually worked 3 months in the wine industry. And then I started an evening acting course because I wanted to become a better presenter in business, because my plan was still to go back home after a year and continue in business. And then I liked acting so much that I started to do the whole year the normal course. And then I liked it so much that I moved to New York City and continued the 2-year study. Now, obviously, in that time in South Africa, I basically had to convince my parents again, because I was going from a normal job leading up to some kind of successful potential position to back to studying at an age where actually you shouldn't go back to studying according to society anymore. But it was a little bit easier because I was already almost a year away from home, and I didn't have to face my parents face to face anymore. It was all over email and over phone. So the pressure of being part of the normal society that graduates, gets a job, and gets children. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but the pressure of that was just a little bit less because I was so far away. I was literally on the other side of the world. Yeah, and then I just did it. I moved to New York City and did another 2 years of acting study.
So at what point do you begin to transition away from the acting and start getting into your, I think is your first big adventure, which is the sailing?
Yes, that's true. I finished my studies in New York City and I moved to Los Angeles, and I had a lawyer to get a work visa, but he made mistakes and my visa was denied and I needed to leave the country. So I had basically the choice of going back home and pursue an acting career there or do something different. And at that time, I had a girlfriend in the United States and her father was into sailing. And through him, I found out that people sailed around the world and made money doing this. And I'm like, this is my dream. From when I was young, my plan was I'm going to get rich and then I'm going to travel the world, and becoming rich kind of never really worked. So I thought, hey, maybe I can travel the world and just make money like that. So I thought within a year, I would probably make a full-time income doing that. Well, that worked out differently, but we'll talk about that more later.
Okay, so your girlfriend's father is into, sailing around the world. You learn about this. Well, how do you go about getting onto or I guess the first thing is, what kind of plan do you have because I think you crossed the Pacific. How did you begin putting the plan into motion, and how did you find your first boat?
I started doing research about how sailing works because I knew literally nothing of sailing. I had never been on a sailing boat before. And the father of the girlfriend I had a friend who lived on a boat in Florida, and he was actually younger than I am. And I actually went there. I lived a week on his boat just to see if I would even like living on a boat. The boat wasn't going anywhere. I mean, we went out for a few hours. It was still a very interesting experience, and I really loved it. And he told me a lot of information. And basically, there's like a route, trade winds, around the world route that follows the trade winds. It originated from many, many years ago, where the sails of the boats were different, and basically they could only sail sort of in one direction. That is also the easiest way to go, because the waves go in the same direction as the boat, And like if you would go in the opposite direction, you would only go half the speed. Now a sailing boat only goes on like a quick walking pace. So if you take half of the speed out of it, then it really takes months and months to get anywhere. So I found this route, and then I found out that the route people most like, or what the dream is for people to do, is either to sail the Mediterranean or to cross the Pacific. And to cross the Pacific made the most sense to me because I was already close there. And my first boat I actually found on a website for crew and in San Diego, and I moved there a month before departure, and I helped him fixing some last things on the boat. Not really boat related, but more like he was putting a new ceiling in and those kind of things. And and off we went. And my first sail was 4 days ongoing on a boat. Well, before that, my longest sails had been like 2 hours or something. So that was an interesting experience.
Now, what was your ultimate destination? Were you trying to hit Australia or New Zealand?
Yes. Well, my ultimate idea was to sail around the world and keep going. But the first stop is basically either New Zealand or Australia, because 95% of the boats that leave either the United States or Mexico or Panama, they all go to New Zealand or Australia.
You leave out of San Diego, and what's like the first big, I guess, island that you would come to?
In San Diego, we left at the Baja Haha. It's a rally. About 140 boats, I think, do it. It stops at 3 places in Mexico, and after that, everybody goes its own way. I'm not even sure anymore what the first island was called, but basically that was one big party. It was like a 1.5 day sail, and then after that, all the sailors came together for a party on the beach, and well, let's say there was a lot of rum.
And so now you're off the coast of Mexico. Do you continue on the same boat, or do you have to get a different boat to continue?
It all depends on which boat you are on and what your deal is with the owner and what the plan is. I stayed for another 3 months or so on this boat, and after that I switched to another boat, and basically I became a boat hitchhiker. That's how they call you when you hop from boat to boat.
Now, does this cost you anything, or are you just trading your time for a ride across the Pacific?
Yeah, it really depends what kind of deal you have with the owner. And funny enough, it doesn't really matter on the experience you have, which I always thought it's more about which owner you meet, what kind of deal he will give you. Basically, as a boat hitchhiker, the worst deal you can have is you pay for food, fuel, and marina fees. So everything is divided by the amount of people on the boat. I mean, the best deal you can get is you only pay for food, or you don't have to pay for anything. It just really depends on the owner. In the beginning, I paid a share of everything. And later, when I knew more about the business and knew more people, I have been on boats where I either paid nothing or where I only paid some food.
3 months later that you're on this boat, where are you when you have to switch boats?
I switched from one boat to the other boat in Mexico, and then with that boat I went to Costa Rica, and that boat decided to go back to the US. They were planning to cross the Pacific, but they didn't. So I took the bus to Panama, and then on Panama I found a boat. I crossed the Pacific Ocean to the Marquesas Islands. In the Marquesas Islands, I actually went on another boat whose autopilot broke, and I helped him hand steer the boat to Tahiti. And from Tahiti, I've been on another boat. And on that boat, I stayed almost until New Zealand. But then I was in Fiji, and then I had the chance to go on this massive catamaran, which was a professional boat, and that was really cool. So I took that boat for the last week to New Zealand.
What was your favorite part of being on Fiji?
Fiji was really nice. I remember being at a hostel, which was about $10 a day, and had like this amazing private beach. There were a lot of nice places in Fiji. There's a big Indian population on Fiji, actually, which I wasn't expecting. Fiji is also very different. All the islands on the Pacific Ocean are very different. If you arrive at the Marquesas Islands, it's so green and it's like one big rock that comes out of the ocean and everything like super green, and there's so many fruits that you can eat, and the people really look like they're all tattooed, and I think tattoos origin from the Marquesas Islands and French Polynesia. So it's really pretty. It's so hard to describe those islands. You have to see it for yourself. And especially after like 40 days on the ocean. It was a really interesting experience because in Panama, basically I met my boat owner, and then a couple of days later I went with him and two other crew on a boat. And this is like, imagine you're going into a room with three people that you don't know, and then you lock the door, and then you're going to stay for 40 days in that room. Well, I think you can imagine that can give some friction sometimes. That was really interesting. We did not do a good grocery shopping. I learned a lot from that because we were shopping and I didn't know what the boat owner had. And I wanted to buy oatmeal, and the boat owner was like, yeah, but I have so much oatmeal, more than enough. So I didn't buy oatmeal. I did buy a 10-kilogram pack of ready pancakes, and they were like laughing at me when I bought it. And then later, when we were on the ocean, we found out that the oatmeal he had was like, well, I could eat it alone in like 4 days. So for 4 people for 40 days, it's not really working. And actually, we ended up eating the whole 10 kilograms of pancake bag. Still, food was a little difficult. So I definitely learned from that. But especially after that, when you arrive to the Marquesas Islands, and it's like after 40 days of not seeing land, like, wow, the sunrises and the sunsets on the boat and the stars at night, you can almost not imagine how beautiful they are. Because around the cities and on land, there's lights, there's pollution, there's buildings. But on the ocean, you don't have that. So you can really see every type of color of sunrise and sunset, pink, purple, golden. It's like every morning and every evening was a treat. It was so beautiful. And the stars at night, when I had to do a night shift, I was just sitting, monitoring and listening to music, and the stars were so bright and so many. Like I'd never ever seen that before. That is definitely the highlight of my sailing trip.
So now you find yourself in New Zealand, and how did the idea for the cycling the length of New Zealand come into your mind?
It seemed like a really cool thing to do, and when I was living on a boat, the first 8 months or so, I found it amazing, and after that, I was a little bit tired of it because every time it takes like a week to get to a new place, not with a car, like a few hours or a day. No, often it just takes a week because it goes so slow. So you really have to love the ocean, and you're always with a bunch of people in a small space. And I just needed my own space. I just didn't want to be cramped with a group of people anymore. And then I thought, what kind of budget trip I can do in New Zealand? And cycling always seemed like a really cool thing to do, and I thought maybe I'll learn something about life from it. So yeah, I came to New Zealand, and I went looking for what kind of bike I should. And basically you have a mountain bike, and then you have a race bike, and then there's something in the middle, which is called cyclocross. I chose for a cyclocross, but sometimes I was alone, and also sometimes I met some friends. There were 2 guys. We traveled sometimes together. They were on mountain bikes. And I noticed that I actually preferred roads often because my bike was just easier on roads, and they preferred off-road. And the beautiful thing about New Zealand are the off-road paths. So if I do it again, I would buy a mountain bike. But also because I make videos, I drag quite a lot of heavy weight with me, like a 20 kilo extra on electronics, and on your bike that is a lot. yeah, that was definitely also one of the reasons that it was easier for those mountain bikers. They went faster on a normal road uphill than me just because they were much lighter in weight.
How did you get the bike? Where did you buy it?
In Auckland, I found a shop that deals in these bikes. And the shop had a deal. You would buy the bike, and if you wanted to sell them back to them, they would buy them back for like 70% or so. And they had everything. So they would make the bike ready with the proper tires, and they'd have pannier bags and racks. Pannier bags are like waterproof bags that you put on the front and on the back of your bike to put stuff in. I actually even made a dynamo. That's one of those things that where you know on old bikes it makes the light go on, and I made one that could charge a USB for my phone. I never ended up using it, but I made it. Yeah, so in the end, I actually took the deal, and after my trip, I returned the bike to them.
How's your budget at this point of your time? But by the time you get to New Zealand, do you have to like stop and do any work in New Zealand?
I didn't have a certain budget for the trip. However, I've learned to travel on a budget really well. This was very different about 10 years ago when I went to Mexico and spent like this a lot of money to go to an all-inclusive hotel with 7 restaurants. And on that money right now, for 10 days, I can probably travel like 6 months now or something. So I've always been really good with not spending. I've never really been good in earning money, but I've been good in not spending. If I look in most of the travels I did, they've never been costing more than $10 a day. Now, I had a bunch of savings money where I've been able, in combination with the money I make from YouTube, to go on for a very long time. So I did not have to stop and do another kind of job yet.
What did you find to be the most challenging part of the bike ride?
Well, cycling is 80% difficult and 20% fun. And I'll try to explain that. It's always either uphill or against the wind or in the rain. And one of the other most challenging things is putting your tent up in the rain and then folding it back up in the rain. But the 20% that you go downhill and you see this amazing view and it's nice weather, that is like super, 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 super amazing. So for me, I did it for that 20%. And also in the trip, I found out that it was an amazing thing to do, but it's not the thing for me to do for the rest of my traveling years.
What did you like most about it?
I love nature, and I loved cycling through nature. In New Zealand, you cycle the Te Aotearoa trip. That's how they call it. And basically, it's like 8 or 9 trails, and in between are just highways or what's that to get from one trail to the other. And the trails are so beautiful. They're man-made mostly, because a lot of people in the towns take those trails for like weekend trips, and then some people actually cycle from one part of the country to the other part, doing many of those trails, and they go over these beautiful bridges, where these narrow wood bridges, where you have to cross like 100 meters of like above a river. The trails are just amazing. Sometimes I was just too heavy to get up a difficult trail, and I literally had to walk next to my bike and push it. That was actually not sometimes. That was actually quite a lot. That was not always fun. But the rest of the trip, the trails. I really like doing the trails.
And how long was the bike trip from start to finish?
It was 3 months, and sometimes I was alone. And sometimes I went with 2 other cyclists from Sweden. And also I had a girlfriend who I met who traveled by bus. So we would literally, in the morning, I would like leave at 6 in the morning to the next destination, and she would like leave at 12 and arrive an hour later at 1, and then I would arrive about the same time.
So how long after the New Zealand cycle adventure does the Vietnam motorcycle adventure start?
Immediately. I finished my cycle trip and then I flew to Vietnam and there I bought a motorbike. And when you hear the word motorbike for me as European or for someone from the US, you have this imagination of this, I don't know, $5,000 real motorbike that drives on the highway. But Vietnam motorbikes are not like that. This is a $200 Chinese ripoff of the Honda version that breaks all the time, and it only goes like 70 kilometers an hour. So you have to. That's their idea of a motorbike.
This is a manual transmission?
Yes, this is a manual transmission. Yes.
Okay, so you started immediately from the cycle tour, but how did you get the idea? Were you thinking about it as you were cycling?
Well, if I look at my travel history, I do sort of challenges. So the sailing challenge was to cross the Pacific, that part that is like the dream of sailors to do. Then cycling, like one of the cycle things that cyclists really like to do is like cycling the Premier Highway in Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, or cycle in New Zealand from top to bottom. So I did that to actually reach the whole trip, start at the bottom. I started at the bottom, yes, and then all the way to the top. And after that, I was looking for a new kind of similar challenge, and a motorbike trip sounded really cool. And I'd heard from people doing it in Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. And then I thought, okay, that sounds cool to do. Like, I can make some decisions very fast. I have the idea in the evening, and then I can be on the plane in the morning. That's a little bit how my brain works.
Were you in Ho Chi Minh City when you bought the bike?
I bought the bike in Ho Chi Minh, and the first time I arrived in Ho Chi Minh, I was like, wow, what's going on in this city? So many people crossing the street was crazy. Like at a certain moment, you get used to it. But I still remember the first time I crossed the street, like step by step. I'm like, I'm going to die, I'm going to die, I'm going to die. And the food was so cheap, especially compared to New Zealand. In New Zealand, I lived off sandwiches with peanut butter and banana. That was basically my daily food. And then occasionally I'd eat like pasta with tuna and powder cheese sauce. But in Vietnam, I could suddenly eat like a lot again because the food was really cheap. And people were so friendly. And I was looking for a motorbike. And actually, the first motorbike I saw, the people looked really like honest. And yeah, I bought it. I didn't go look for other motorbikes, which looking back at it was not so smart because I didn't really buy a good bike. It broke down all the time. All the time.
Like, so what was wrong with it?
Everything was wrong with that. When you're traveling as a foreigner with a motorized vehicle in a foreign country, then there's always two things that can go wrong. It's buying the wrong vehicle, like now a Chinese ripoff of a Honda, which is everybody drives it. But then you have bad mechanics. So for an example, there's one cylinder on the engine, and there are like 4 pins that hold the cylinder against the engine, or whatever the name is, doesn't matter. But one of those pins was loose, and I didn't know it. So every time when the mechanics fixed it, they fixed it, but then they left the one pin loose. So obviously, after like a couple 100 kilometers, it will break again. And at a certain moment, I was so tired of it, and I know a little bit about mechanics, so I literally put my bike next to a mechanic, and I use his tools, and I try to fix it myself. And then I found the problem, and then I let the mechanic fix the rest what I could not fix. But I was watching every step that I knew for sure that now all the 4 pins were tight. And that problem then was over. But, soon after that, another problem came.
So what was your route in Vietnam?
I started in Ho Chi Minh and I drove to Hanoi. That was quite a long route. And then in Hanoi, actually, my mom came to visit me there. That was really nice. This took about 2 months, I would say. And then I drove into Cambodia, and I drove from Cambodia to Laos. So basically, it's a big circle that I did. Yeah, and in Laos, I sold the motorbike for the same price. At that moment, I had a girlfriend, and then we did a little bit of backpacking in Thailand before we flew to Kyrgyzstan.
Before we get to getting to Kyrgyzstan, tell me about the trip up the coast of Vietnam from Ho Chi Minh up to
Ho Chi Minh to Hanoi.
To Hanoi, yes, thank you.
Vietnam is amazing. I think Vietnam is the new Thailand. I can be wrong on that, but Thailand is like mass tourism, and I feel like the people don't really care that much about tourism anymore because there's so much. And in Vietnam, it's still like newer. So people are so friendly and so hospitable. I do feel like it's not a culture where you really mingle a lot with the locals. Like generally in these countries, the foreigners stay with the foreigners unless you book a homestay. And then you pay money to get sort of the local experience. It's very different to some other countries where you really just, which are not touristic at all, where you really just get invited by families and then stay with them. It's definitely very touristic, but I understand that it's one of the top places to go for young people now because it is cheap. There are parties. There are a lot of other travelers that you meet there. It's how do I describe it differently?
So, what was your routine on a day when you're riding? What time of the morning do you start to ride, and how long do you ride for? And
in Vietnam, I had the idea to become a daily travel YouTuber, which basically means trying to make one video a day and then editing it in the evening, which was crazy because every morning I started around 7, tried to come up with an idea, visited some places, and then when I was traveling alone, I slept at a hostel in the evening, and then I would edit a video, which would usually take till like 12 or 1 in the morning, and then if there was still something going, I would have a drink, and then I would go to bed. Yeah, and about places to visit, Vietnam is famous for waterfalls, a lot of beautiful waterfalls. There are theme parks. They have a lot of coffee bean factories. There are beautiful hikes. That's basically my average day in Vietnam, I would say. And in a city, I would do like a city tour.
So you and your girlfriend head off after this, after you're done with your bike trip to Kyrgyzstan. Why did you pick that destination?
After traveling Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, we went to Thailand. And there were so many tourists. Like I would come to this beautiful viewpoint at sunset, and there would be like 300 or 400 other tourists, and like at least half of them with cameras. And I thought, what value am I adding as a YouTuber to make a video of this sunset and this mountain when there's so many people with cameras? And I thought maybe I should go to a place where other people don't go. Then I know somebody whose brother drove the similar van as I have from Kyrgyzstan to my home country, the Netherlands. And originally I wanted to buy a van in Thailand and drive to the Netherlands, but it's really difficult to buy and register a car in Thailand. So that didn't really work. And I always wanted to have this Volkswagen Combi, the original hippie van. But then I wanted the actual original, like the T1, not the T2. And to buy one, you have to go to Brazil or Germany because that's where they're last built. In Brazil, they built the T2 Combi till 2012 or something, or just very long. But I didn't really want to go to those countries yet. So I thought that car, the car I have now, also seems really cool and is also an old-timer. Yeah, I mean, maybe I should buy that one and drive that one to the Netherlands. I actually never drove to the Netherlands. I drove towards the Netherlands, and when I came close, I turned around and drove in the other direction. But I was on my way to the Netherlands.
Or let me go back and ask one question first. So
Yeah,
when you were in Thailand then with all these crowds, what month was it?
I don't remember. I'm sure it was some summer month or so, but I think it's normal. I think Thailand is just really. I wasn't Chiang Mai, which was also a very touristic place. I think it's just very touristic there, which is fine. And especially if you're a short-term traveler, you might not even realize it. But if you're traveling for a long time, then you kind of get more interested in the less explored nature places more than the busy, crowded, full with tourists places.
What was the process like to get this van in Kyrgyzstan?
To find the van, I had someone helping me who rents out these vans in Kyrgyzstan. And to register the van was a bit of a pain, especially I don't speak the language. I traveled a year in Russian-speaking countries, and I know like 10 words of Russian. But, if you really want it, you figure it out. So eventually we figured it out. I'm sure it took 10 times the time that somebody would take who is from the country itself. But whatever, found it out. And then converted it to a camper van. Actually, we lived at a pastor who was also a carpenter, and he helped with building the interior. And he didn't speak English, and we didn't speak Russian. So we had Google Translate, and we had a pen and a paper, and that's how we figured it out.
Can you describe your van, this UAZ 452? It's pretty cool looking. It's different looking. It's Russian vehicle. And when you see it next to like an old VW camper van, it looks much bigger. It looks much taller.
Yes, it looks like a blown up Volkswagen T2. The space inside is very similar, only the US 452 is a Jeep. Okay, I will try to explain what the US 452 exactly is. The US 452 is a military vehicle that is built to drive 500 kilometers maximum in the worst conditions, with probably a machine gun on top of it. That's what it's built for. It's absolutely not built to travel long distance. However, I didn't know that. I am from the Netherlands, and my first two cars were Honda, and my other two cars were German. They were a Volkswagen and Mercedes. And in my experience, every single old car you buy can drive 20,000 kilometers at least with bumps, and then maybe there's one tiny issue, and after that drive another 30,000 kilometers or more before you have one more tiny issue. I was not aware that these horrible vans even exist. Like, I bought the van, and then, sure, it's an old van, so driving around the world with an old-timer probably isn't the most smart decision you can make, but hey, we're all naive at some point, so I'm definitely much less naive then than I am now. And
so you got this van, and so far you're not you don't sound too happy with it at this point. It sounds like it's giving you a lot of headaches.
Oh, it gives me so many headaches. So I bought the van and I brought it to the official UAZ garage, and I asked them make everything perfect. So I bought the van for $2,000, and I spent another $1,000 on getting it like 100%. Now, in the United States or in Europe, if you spend $1,000 to a dealer, well, you get a big service and maybe one small thing fixed. But in Kyrgyzstan, they rebuild like the whole car for $1,000. So I thought that I was ready to drive 30,000 kilometers without any issues. Well, that was not true. Since then, I've had big issues, on average between 500 and 1,000 kilometers, and I'm not overreacting. I've had so many issues. Since I've had my van, I've had 3 different engines, 3 different gearboxes, 2 different axles, and basically everything else on the van has been broken down. In Pakistan, where the labor was like super cheap. Like they did 4 months of work for like $300. I decided that I was done with all these issues, and basically he made a Toyota out of it. I now have a Toyota Land Cruiser engine, a Toyota gearbox of a Toyota van, and Toyota axles. And I still have some Russian parts, but not a lot anymore. And I'm really, really happy about that.
Cool. I didn't know all those modifications were done.
Sadly, yes. And sadly, I'm a little bit of a forced mechanic now.
Eventually, you guys decide to head into Iran. What was your experience like traveling through Iran?
The people are super friendly in Iran. The food is amazing. Oh, and like the diesel, it's a little bit difficult sometimes to get it because you need to use the card of like a truck driver because you need to have a registered card and you cannot get it as a foreigner. I paid like $2 for a liter. Like seriously, I have a 60-liter tank and another 30-liter tank, and I would like fill it up for like less than $2. I'm like, wow, this is amazing. Iran, basically, you go to Iran for the cities, not really for the nature. There is nature, but you go there for the cities. So you drive from city to city, and there's a lot of old history. And I like old buildings, and some cities were super nice, like so much beautiful historical buildings. The traditional restaurants were super cheap and amazing. And the people were so, so friendly. But sometimes for a foreigner, that can be a little bit too much. And this is for Iran and Pakistan, same. It's because there are not so many foreigners. And besides that, in their religion, the religion says you have to be extra friendly to a traveler. Now, a traveler is also someone from their own religion that comes to their town, but obviously they see that I'm a traveler because I'm driving in a white-orange van with a foreign license plate. And it's so many people, and in countries with so many people, they don't really know the sense of privacy. So what happened often was I was trying to find a place to sleep, and then I parked like quite a bit off the road. And then at 6 a.m, people were knocking on my van just because they wanted to say hi and like welcome to our country. And this is really nice, and I appreciate that. But as a traveler at 6 a.m. or as a human being at 6 a.m., I like to sleep. I like to wake up at 7:30 or 8 or whatever, and not every time at 6 because somebody wants to stick his head in my car and say hello, even though and on one hand it feels rude to say it because they just want to be friendly, but I also just really like to sleep at 6 a.m. in the morning. And that sketches a bit of the amount of attention you get in these countries, Iran, Pakistan, and as far as I know, also India. And to me, as a person who really loves to be in a nature with a lake or with trees surrounding and not so many or no people, this is the other end of the spectrum. And this is in these countries which I personally sometimes had a bit difficulty with.
Sure, I understand what you mean. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I saw a video or something where you mentioned being interrogated. Of course, you're a YouTuber, so you're out with your camera, but I think that caught some attention of some police, and then you ended up being interrogated. What was that about?
How long are you following me? Because that video is one of the few that is deleted.
Maybe you mentioned it. You might have just mentioned it in the video, so I just caught that mention.
Yes, that's true. Yes, that's true. We were walking over the street, and at that time I was filming with my DSLR, like a big microphone. So just imagine something journalist, professional look. For Iran, it was too professional looking. So this car stopped, policeman in it, but it was not the police car, and they asked us to come to a interrogation room. No, well, they actually asked us to join them, and I was like, "Do I have to?" And he was like, "Yeah, you have to." And then they brought us to some building. We sat in concrete walls and were interrogated for a. They did give us tea. That was the positive side of it. And this was my first time in an interrogation room. Yeah, this was a really strange experience. I felt bad for my dog because he sat in the car for a long time, but the policemen were so nice in the middle of the interrogation to drive to the hotel we were staying so I could walk him. And then we went back. They wanted to go there anyway to see the license plate of my van. Yeah, basically, they asked us a lot of questions. They went to all the photos and all the footage. And then in the end, we were wild camping somewhere and we walked on this mountain and I filmed the top of that mountain. And they asked for like half an hour why I was filming the mountain. And I tried to explain them that the Colorful Mountains of the Breeze are a tourist spot and we found a place to sleep and we like to walk up mountains. And I don't know, for some reason that, yeah, they didn't really understand why we walked up that mountain. So I don't know if there was something in that mountain or not, but after 8 hours, they let us go. At that moment, it was very difficult for me to understand, and I was a bit angry on it. But I think I understand. Iran is in a very difficult position, and I was very professional looking. I should have shown them my payroll from YouTube. Maybe then I didn't look so professional anymore. I didn't tell them I was a YouTuber. I didn't tell them I was a YouTuber because I was afraid that that would affect something. And actually, a while later when I was in Pakistan, it happened again. And this was like only a week after I was in Pakistan. But I met another YouTuber and then we were in a town that is known to be very political. And we were there. He drives a rickshaw, which is like one of those Indian or Pakistani things on 3 wheels. And I was driving my van. And we were driving around in his rickshaw with like heavy camera gears and drones. So I don't know. They took us out. But this went a bit weird because the rickshaw friend of mine had 2 police guys with him. Because if you sleep in hotels at that time, now I think it's different because this was in the beginning of tourism. In certain places of the south, so not in the north of the country, in certain places of the south, if you sleep in hotels, you get police escort. And I didn't have it because I was in my van. So the policeman said we had to go back to the hotel for some security issues. And then there were men with guns who basically quickly forced us to get into a car. And then they drove us to a interrogation room again for 8 hours. But now I was like, okay, I know how this goes. Yeah, okay, it'll probably be 8 hours. And they gave us food. And I was with a friend of mine. So, yeah, and I think all these things mostly happened because we did something, with all this camera gear and very different than what normal travelers do. So that's why we were picked out. And that was why it happened. But yeah, Pakistan later, I'll go back to Iran. Iran is famous for the beautiful historical buildings. I especially remember this city in the middle of the country, which is like the oldest city of Iran. I just cannot get to the name right now. And they're like these houses of merchants, which used to be very wealthy, and they're a long time dead, but they kept houses as museums. And they're so beautiful, so big. You can see that people have worked on that for like years and years to make it like this. That was what I really, really enjoyed. Also, the Iranian people were really friendly. Of course, my van has also broken down a couple of times, like it does in every country. Then I still had Russian mechanics, so it was even worse. And when it was broken down, one time the mechanic was fixing it, and then in the evening he invited us to have dinner with him and his family. And yeah, it's really nice to get to know a culture from so close. That is also definitely one of the highlights of every country that I go to learn about the culture and the people of the country.
After Iran, I guess you went to Pakistan. And what kind of a route did you do through Pakistan?
If you drive overland from Iran to Pakistan, you have to cross and get military escort as a foreigner. And this takes about 5 to 6 days. So In the morning, I crossed from Iran to Pakistan. And then a few hours later, when I crossed, they literally bring you to the police station like 500 meter or 1 kilometer ahead. And then you have to stay the night, the rest of the day. And basically what happens is with your passport, they're going to, fill it in and they're going to notify the whole system that foreigner with a car is coming and that the escort has to be ready. If there are more foreigners, then they will drive in the same escort. And the morning after, around 10, 11, you will go. I was the only car. And sometimes someone is just sitting next to you with a gun, or sometimes two. Sometimes a car is driving behind you. Sometimes a car is driving in front of you. And basically what happens is they go from checkpoint and then it changes. So it starts, go to the next checkpoint, and then the guy, for an example, that was sitting next to me goes out, and then the other car, a car will start driving in front of me. The system works pretty well. There's literally someone waiting at the next checkpoint to continue, so you don't really have to wait. This is because that part of Baluchistan is just, they're really afraid of something to happen to a foreigner, because also they don't want to be bad in the news. So it's kind of a service they give to foreigners, I guess. And it takes about 5 days till you either reach Lahore, which is like Middle East, or Karachi, where I went to, which is like all the way the southernmost point. So yeah, after 6 days of police escort with machine guns everywhere, and suddenly it was 10 in the evening and it was dark, and basically the escort stopped, and I found that out because I didn't see a car behind me anymore. And now it was dark, no street lights. Everybody drives with their big lights on, so you're blinded the whole time. The road was bad, and I had to try to find a place to sleep, and I didn't know where to sleep yet. That was my entrance into Pakistan, so that was interesting. But eventually, with time, you figure everything out.
What was your favorite part of it there?
Well, Pakistan is divided in north and south, and basically the south is flat. So you drive 2,000 kilometers from the old capital, Karachi, to the new capital, Islamabad, and it's just flat. And from Islamabad up to the north, it's a circle. And that is like the same area as Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan. So it's very mountainous, very pretty. And I definitely really like the northern areas. And I've been a long time in Pakistan because my van broke down like 3 times, and 2 times was a big break. And after the big break, I decided to go to Toyota mechanics. So I've been a long time in Islamabad and also made a bunch of good friends there, which was also really nice. However, I must say, if you look back at my history, I think I spent 30 to 40% at least of my time and money, travel money, on fixing my car, living at mechanic shops. And even though I have amazing stories out of this, not always, but for an example, going to Kyrgyzstan, I'm driving down this hill, something engine, and it's in the middle of nowhere, and then this guy comes with a similar car, and he tries to help, but we don't speak the same language. And then another car comes by, a guy who speaks Russian and English, and he helps to translate. Apparently something is broken in the engine, and he offers to tow me to his house, like 100 kilometers away for 4, which from a European point of view is nothing. And then fix it for like another $40, I think like $80 in total. But in reality, he needed 4 days to take the engine apart and to fix it. And I spent those 4 days with the family, having breakfast, having lunch, having dinner. And that was a really amazing local experience. So I will always be thankful for that. However, the majority of the time when my van was broken down, I'd just been, standing still in the middle of nowhere or living at mechanic shops in my van. Yeah, those 30 or 40% of my money and time that I spend on that was not worth it. I would not advise someone else to buy an old-timer and travel the world, because I think you should spend your money in seeing places. And to give you an example, I was in Kazakhstan, and and Rob was there too. Rob is an older guy and drives this big MAN truck. And we left at the same time, and he drove to Africa. He drove all the way to Cape Town. Then he shipped his truck to Australia, drove massive Australia. Then now he's going to ship his truck to South America, and we'll probably meet again. And in that same time, I drove Iran and Pakistan and shipped my van to South America. So, this is like, what do you want, like, when I bought a camper van, I could choose between comfort and cool. I decided to be cool. Well, I might be a little bit cooler, but I rather would have chosen for comfort.
Let's talk about YouTube for a few minutes. What are you using right now for a camera?
Right now, I am using a Canon G7X Mark III and a DJI Mavic Pro 1. I actually also have a DSLR, Canon 80D, which was my very first DSLR. I never had a different one, but I filmed with some different DSLRs of friends. When I started making YouTube videos, I bought a DSLR, a Canon 80D, a big DJI drone, the Phantom, and I also have a gimbal. And if you look at Casey Neistat's video, he said, like, you should film with the very best camera you have, and you always see him filming mainly with a DSLR, the Canon 70D, 80D, 90D. I don't know which one he has these days. But at the time when he became famous, the DSLR was like, just affordable and was like amazing, and the small pocket cameras were not so great. However, if you want to make a stable shot with a DSLR, you have to put it on a gimbal. So this is what I did for like 1.5 years. I would walk around with this 1 kilogram, or 2 pounds stabilizer gimbal. And then the camera with lens is like another like 2 or 3 pounds. And then a big microphone on top of it. And it's crazy. Like the small cameras, the pocket cameras these days, the stabilizer is so much better than the DSLRs. And the quality is, you cannot change the lens. That's maybe, sometimes that's nice that you can do that. But the quality is great. And these days, they even come with a microphone input. And even with my drone, when my drone breaks, I'm going to buy a smaller one, because the Mavic Pro can do so many awesome things for video makers that I just never do. And one size smaller and one size cheaper, I can do the exact same things with it as what I do now. And if it breaks, it's only half of the price. A friend of mine, he's a food vlogger, and he came to 1 million subscribers with a phone. Okay, he had the Samsung Note 8, which I actually have now too. Just, I thought if everything breaks, I can always say like, hey, I have the $1 million phone, so I shouldn't whine that not having gear. I can do it on my phone. But the reality is, he's a food vlogger, so most of his shots are still standing. And most of my shots are moving. Even though you can put a microphone on a phone, there is still a big quality difference. I think if you cannot make an amazing vlog with the Canon G7X Mark III that I have, and like the Mavic, let's take the cheaper one, I think it's the Go. If you cannot make an amazing vlog with those two small things, then it has nothing to do with the equipment. It has to do with your own professional skills. It's really not about buying better equipment. It's about having the equipment that is good enough, and then becoming better in what you do. Because YouTube is not about the gear that you have. It has to be good enough, but it's about so many things. You have to get better in storytelling. You have to learn how to frame something. You have to find out what kind of thumbnails or pictures you like. And this is an ongoing process. This is still, for me, daily the question how to improve this.
You have to learn how to be creative with the tools that you have.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, it's good to have some good material, some nice material, but you don't have to overreact it. I think YouTube goes in phases. Like in the beginning, anything that you put on YouTube was a success. Then we had the first drones. Any drone video that was made was like a huge success. Well, definitely that's not anymore right now. Then YouTubers became better into video making. And then you saw a lot of video makers also on YouTube, and that became a huge success. But then that became really close to TV again, and that was also not what people wanted to see. And now, if you see someone like Bald Bankrupt, for an example, he films things on a GoPro. There's nothing nice about his cinematography, but his stories are really good, and it's real. And I think that's a bit what it is right now. But in the end, it'll always be story that wins, and not the gear you have or the it'll never be anything else. A story will always win.
Are you making enough money on YouTube right now to sustain your travels, or are you going to have to, you think, stop and somehow find another way to fill up your bank account?
I am making about $300 a month on YouTube and on Patreon. Last year it was more on YouTube. It varies a little bit, but this on average, and this has to become more. Yes, I can live in these countries from this. However, it's a little bit risky, because if I have to go to the dentist, or there's one crossing I have to do from Panama to Panama, there's no road. You have to put the car on a boat, which is $1,200. So that are risks, and I don't have a lot of savings money left anymore, like a little over $2,000. So at this moment, I'm kind of in a bit of a danger zone. But when I was in Pakistan, I knew that this was coming. And like Pakistan, Iran, India it's cheap countries, but in a way it's also expensive to travel, because you need a carnet de passage, a certain document that allows your car to be in those countries for 1 year. That document is like $700-800 a year. You can only be like 3 months in every country, and then it's difficult to get an extension. Country South America, things are much easier. You cross a border and you get new 8 months to be in the next country. Right now it's a little bit more difficult, because since yesterday the borders are closed due to the coronavirus, but I expect in a little while it to go open again. I wanted to be in these countries that if a problem would happen with that it would be easy to either leave my car for a while, or that I didn't have a really difficult process and to stay for me and my car. So yeah, if everything keeps goes and nothing major breaks, then it's fine. But if my gear starts breaking down, or my van has a big breakdown, then I might have a problem. So I do need a little bit of luck in the future. Trying to work really hard to get my YouTube videos a little bit more up. And the thing is, I'm living a pretty amazing life. And look at a normal household in the United States or in Europe. Let's say that you live in a cheap area and you live on yourself. You probably need like $1,000 to pay rent, to buy food, to pay for your car. If you live in a little bit more expensive neighborhood, not New York City, but more expensive, maybe $2,000. But I can live off $300 a month, which is like less than $4,000 a year. So I don't need so much money to sustain this lifestyle. And I have an amazing life. So we'll keep trying to make it work, but I can keep doing this as long as I can.
Well, it sounds like you've set yourself up for some good success. So you've got your truck hopefully fixed up with some Toyota components. So it's going to make it to Alaska, and you are in the van life sort of overlanding category, which is very popular, I think, on YouTube. So there's I think an opportunity to make some more progress on YouTube with that content.
Yeah. Currently, I'm working on storytelling, because I think for me as a non-native English speaker, that is a thing I want to be better in. I've learned a lot about all the other facets. I've worked together with filmmakers. And I think at a certain moment, you just need to find your own style and stick to that. We'll see how it goes. I like what I do, and I think that that's the most important thing in life.
So now you're either in Argentina or Chile, somewhere in South America, and you're heading north. What's coming up for you in the near future? What's your next plans?
I'm driving to Alaska, and that will probably take 2 or 3 years. I don't know, but I have the time. In the beginning, I used to travel really fast, and I'm a little bit tired of traveling fast. So I'm going to travel slow and really experience everything. And yeah, after 2 or 3 years, when I reach to Alaska, I don't know. I guess then it all depends on how the money goes. And then I have to make a new plan. I would like to have my own boat and continue sailing. But I guess we'll have to look in 2 or 3 years how things look like.
Well, Huub, how can people contact you if they want to learn more?
I try every question that anybody could possibly have to put them in a video, because I am so busy making videos that often I even postpone talking to family. So if I can really help someone with something, they can always send me an email, which is connected to my YouTube channel and about, so they can find it there. But it would be difficult for me if hundreds of people would start sending me emails, because then I don't have time anymore to make videos.
So if people just want to know what your YouTube channel is, it's Huub Vlogs, which is HUUB VLOGS. You just search that on YouTube and you will find it.
Yes.
Well, Huub Vandermark, I want to say thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your story, all the crazy and amazing adventures that you've done so far. And I want to wish you the best of luck with your van and your dog and your journey north towards Alaska.
Thank you very much. I wish the same for your channel. I think you're doing a great job, and I saw the amount of interviews you've already done. That's great. I can really appreciate that.
Thank you. Thanks again for listening. You can find this episode online at thepursuitzone.com/TPZ189. That's TPZ189. The best way to support the podcast is, of course, to subscribe and share the episode with your friends. You'll find subscription links over at thepursuitzone.com. You can like and follow on Facebook and Twitter. The tag is @thepursuitzone. If you want to write to me, you can do so at paul@thepursuitzone.com, or if you want to leave a voice message and maybe get your voice on the show, you can do so by going to speakpipe.com/thepursuitzone. This episode was recorded on March 16th, 2020. For the show notes and more great adventure travel podcasts, visit thepursuitzone.com.